I was thinking about this sermon today, and actually we're starting a series today, and it's going to be kind of a lengthy one, but it's one that we're going to be spending some time in the Old Testament. So we kind of spent a good amount of time really with the focus on the Sermon on the Mount last time, and so we're going to spend time on the Old Testament now for a little while. And so we're going to spend some time in a series called For God and Country. So that's what the series is going to be. It's going to be called For God and Country. And as we were thinking about it, we're up on the heels of the 4th of July, and I wanted to ask you, starting out, think about some things that you're thankful for in this country. Think about some things that you are thankful for in this country. What are some things you're thankful for in this country?
Freedom to worship.
A freedom to worship.
Without retaliation.
And without retaliation.
Freedom to vote the way you want to vote.
Freedom to vote. I got you there. What else comes to mind?
Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What else are you thankful for about this country?
That if you have a dream and you work at it, you can achieve it.
Okay.
You don't have anybody saying, no, it's not yours.
Okay. Anybody want to say Chick-fil-A? Anybody? Just me?
Yeah.
What else comes to mind? Anything that hadn't been said already? What are you thankful for about in this country?
Family. I mean, there's some countries that don't get to enjoy the family, the children and stuff are taken, so.
That's right. That's right.
They have our family.
That's a very good one. I met a girl from China one time when I was in college, and she hadn't seen her parents in it was like over a decade, because they had sent her away to live with her grandparents so she'd be close to the school that they wanted her to go to in China. And so it wasn't like she wrote letters back and forth or called them or anything like that. It was like, no, you're done with these parents. So she had no contact with them. And so that's a good point.
They're very, interesting fact, nothing on that, but my niece, she teaches online children from China English.
Okay.
And it's very different because she said that they go to school all day. Like she teaches at like 2 o'clock in the morning because of the time difference, but they go to school all day and they come home and they're required to get online and do this. And she said, I've been teaching a little bitty kid not pay attention, and she said, the parent just comes up and smacks him upside the head, tell him just pay attention. So.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. That's a big one. What else comes to mind? Anything else come to mind this morning?
Just the multitude of resources the United States has, just natural resources that we have that other places don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this place, and I've come to appreciate more of that in the past year, because I've been everywhere from Seattle to DC and lots of places in between. And, for somebody who doesn't have a chance to travel or see these places firsthand, it really makes you appreciate the land that we have, the place that we have, in the world. It makes you appreciate exactly what Martha Carroll said, the abundance of things that just are right here. So, others?
Right to bear arms.
The right to bear arms?
In the country.
Second Amendment, yeah.
Sacrifices.
The sacrifices?
They have sacrifice.
Okay. That we had some people willing to sacrifice for this country. See, it's not hard to come up with a list, and we can run through things from the Constitution. We can talk about things within the country itself. We can, talk about things of the past and that are still going on. We can really come up with a good list of things that we love about our country. And it's kind of natural to appreciate that abundance. It's kind of natural to appreciate the blessings you have, because you recognize where they came from. They didn't just drop in your lap. that God gave them to you. That you live in this place and this time for a reason. In this family, in this location, God has blessed you with this. So we don't take it for granted, And so that's kind of natural in a lot of ways. And it's kind of natural to love your country, not just appreciate it, but to love it. We kind of have a tendency to just to respond in that way. Because when you think about God and country, you've never seen God. But you've seen your country. You've seen the blessings around. You've actually, had that kind of visual experience. And so, for a lot of people, it's a lot easier to love your country that you experience and you see than it is to love God. And so there is being a tension because this is the right order. God is first. And then country. That's the right order. But we have a tendency to want to push this and drop this. Or at least put it to second. I want to give you some questions. Not so much like the first one, because this is a little bit more, let's say, rhetorical. But think about this, and maybe you could answer quickly, but if not, that's fine. Have you ever felt like you may not have it in the right order? That you may actually love your country more than you love God? See, there's a tension. Like I said, some of it is maybe hard to avoid. Have you ever felt like some of our politicians get it in the wrong order? Our leaders. Maybe you don't feel like that's been an issue for you, but maybe you've noticed it in others, like a politician, like a leader, that they actually don't have it in the right way. Have you ever felt like your country was in conflict with God? Ever see something going on, maybe on a national level, maybe a governmental level, something that represents our country cohesively, and you think, wow, that kind of puts us in conflict with God. Have you ever felt like the country seemed closer to God than it does now? Maybe when you were younger, maybe in high school, maybe as a kid, whatever, but you ever look back and kind of think, you know what, I think there was a time where more people got this order right. I think there was a time, and I don't know if you want to call it the good old days, because, there's always things like that, but maybe you just feel like there was a time things were a little bit more right than they are now. See? And I'll give you one more. You ever been disappointed and think that this is headed downhill, far away from God? Now here's the thing. A lot of heads nodded, a lot of people smiled, a lot of people, could kind of relate to those questions I'm throwing out, those rhetorical questions, but they're hitting home, and I'm telling you why. They're hitting home because you got common ground with somebody. You got common ground with Jeremiah. Because he felt all those same things. And he told God about it. Jeremiah felt all those same things. You got common ground with Jeremiah. So when you look back at those Old Testament stories and you see the book of Jeremiah and you just kind of, wow, that's so long ago and it's so different and such a far away place. Look, you've got common ground with Jeremiah. Because all those things that we talked about 2 minutes ago, he experienced, he felt, and we hear about it. And we get to learn from it. In the midst of all of it. And so our focus today, as we begin this series, is Jeremiah's perspective. Jeremiah's perspective. That's what we want to kind of get a feel for this morning as we go down this road in this book of the book of Jeremiah. That's where we want to start. We want to start to get an idea and understand Jeremiah a little bit as we go down this road. Because we've already seen we got common ground with this guy. We've already seen that we felt the same way he's felt. We've understood things the way he's understood it. And we need to learn his perspective this morning as we go forward. So I'll tell you, if you're not already reading something consistently in the Bible, whether it's a program or whatever, why don't you join us going forward and reading the book of Jeremiah? Okay? That's what I'd suggest you. Read in the book of Jeremiah with us. Because I think it'll enlighten you. I think it'll help you in the way we're talking about it. It'll help make sense of maybe some parts that you might, struggle with or something. It'll be easy for you. Okay? So that's what we're looking at this morning. Jeremiah's perspective. Say that with me. Jeremiah's perspective. One more time. Jeremiah's perspective. That's right. Now, what I want to start off doing is I want to give you 5 things about Jeremiah you need to know. Okay? Now, some of y'all that have been in my Sunday evening class and we've talked about, reading and understanding the Bible, these would be 5 things that will help you in that process because it's good to have context. It's good to have some idea about historical things going on, about the person's life. It kind of helps put things together for you. Okay? And so I want to give you 5 things to know about Jeremiah. Okay? First thing I want you to know is this is actually the longest Old Testament book. Now, if you divide it up into chapters, there's other books with more chapters. But if you actually counted the words, and some people did, you actually count the words, Jeremiah is actually the longest book in the Old Testament. Jeremiah is actually the longest book in the Old Testament. And so you think about, is he just another prophet? He's not just another prophet. All the prophets are great, but this is the one that we get the most volume from, the quantity from. Okay? This is the longest Old Testament book, and it runs roughly 40 years. So you want to talk about the time span that the book covers, it's roughly 40 years. So it's the longest Old Testament book, and it's roughly 40 years. Second thing, it's in the era of 500 to 600 BC. I could give you exact dates, but then you'd probably forget them, and then you just, it wouldn't be helpful. But just think in terms of just kind of a general idea to help you kind of locate it. 600 BC. That's the time curve we're talking about. 5 to 600 BC. Baruch. Everybody say Baruch. Baruch. Anybody know who Baruch is? He's a scribe. He's like an assistant, a friend of Jeremiah's. He's the one that we get Jeremiah's book from. All indications are that he's the guy who's put it together for us. It's mentioned several times about he's the one writing this, and he's the one writing that, and he's putting this together. And so Baruch, this assistant, this friend, this scribe of Jeremiah, is the one who put this for us. Can't tell the story of Jeremiah without Baruch. Another good thing to remember is that the book of Jeremiah is put together like an anthology, not a biography. It's put together like an anthology, not a biography. And so you're not going to open up chapter 1 and he's a little boy, and chapter 2 he's a young man, and chapter 3 he's an adult, and you're just going to kind of roll your way through it. It's not put together that way. put together on different themes. Okay, we got this part's going to talk about this, and we got all the writings that talk about that subject. And then we got another subject we're going to tackle. And we're going to put all those together. And then we've got this part here where Baruch is going to tell us something about the life of Jeremiah, some event in his life, and that'll get put in there. But it's not put together like a biography. And so don't go into it thinking that because you'll just be confused by it. The proper way to look at it is call it an anthology, not a biography. Okay? And this life of Jeremiah, the one that we're actually going to find a lot of common ground with, a lot that we have in common with, it starts off with his role of warning the people and the leaders that if they don't change things, judgment is coming. If they don't stop doing what they're doing, if they don't repent, if they don't get things right, and these things just kind of multiply. I mean, there was one thing after another, until basically Jerusalem looked as pagan as Babylon. You couldn't tell the difference. And so God is warning them through Jeremiah. He's warning them, turn back, stop this, don't do this. And he's just going through this process. And he's using Jeremiah to sound the alarm. If you don't, judgment will come. You are going to lose this city. You are going to lose your land. And so that's a good portion of his ministry, of his work. And the other, second part is proclamation. Because he changes, and it's a very, deep, heartbreaking kind of thing, because you can kind of see it change within the scriptures. When he goes from, you need to stop, God is going to judge you, you need to stop, God is going to put an end to this, to God saying, don't tell them I'm going to put an end to this. Tell them I'm putting an end to this. You see the difference? God goes from stop, I'm going to put an end to this, to I'm putting an end to this. Things are already in motion. Jeremiah, you can stop praying for him. And that's a hard thing to see. It goes from warning to proclamation. To inspiration. God doesn't let this story end. He doesn't let this anthology end. He doesn't let this book end without there being hope. Without there being, that glimmer of hope, that light in this dark time. After the judgments come and they've been carried off and people are being, taken into slavery and all this has happened. The armies have come and done their work. He still offers them glimmers of hope at the end. There's going to be a time it's going to change. Yes, God has punished you. Yes, you didn't listen. Yes, you made your country just as bad as every pagan country. But God's not giving up on you. Things can turn around. And so even after all that, Jeremiah becomes a voice of inspiration. That things can go back. And there is still hope. And so that's three big ministries we see of Jeremiah. Warning, proclamation, inspiration. And it's kind of interesting, and maybe somebody who's read the Bible, maybe you've kind of noticed this too, is that when God finally lowers the boom, when he finally acts and makes happen exactly what he said was going to happen, it kind of shocks us. Like, wow, God's so hard. God's so judgmental. And he's been warning them for generations. But we're so used to God's patience. And when we see his judgment, it kind of surprises us. We're so used to his patience. When we see his judgment, it kind of surprises us. It can happen in this country too. We're so used to his patience that when judgment comes, it kind of surprises us. Because God is not tolerant. He's patient. He's patient. So that's what we see here with Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah, like I said, we've got common ground with him because we love our country. There's things about it we love. There's places we love. There's things within the freedoms that we enjoy that we love. There's so much of this we love. And Jeremiah loved his country. And that's a big reason why we see Jeremiah being the prophet to do this. It's because he had a sincere love for his country. And so when he's out there warning them, stop, this is not right. God has told you. Look at his law. When he's out there warning them and pleading, and at some point to tears, they know he's sincere. This guy is broken up by it. This hurts him deeply to see his great nation just crumble and to turn against God. And he takes God seriously because he's got this right. Jeremiah, as much as he loves his country, he knows that's first. So if you have a Bible, or can get to it real quick, I want to take you to the very beginning of Jeremiah chapter 1. Like I said, it's a big book, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. Jeremiah chapter 1. After a little bit of introduction, we'll look at verse 4 and 5. So Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 4 and 5. It says, "The word of the Lord came to me, saying," so God is introducing himself to Jeremiah. Imagine you're in this place. Imagine Jeremiah's family is a family of priests. And everything tells us they were probably very faithful with that, even though the country was a mess. But he hears from God himself. The word of the Lord came to me. And this is how God introduces himself. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appoint you as a prophet to the nations. God had already decided. God's forming this child in the womb. And he'd already decided, this child will be born. I'm setting him apart. He is going to be my prophet to the nations. He's going to be my prophet. That's Jeremiah's introduction to God. I knew you, I formed you, I set you apart. You're going to be a prophet. You're going to be a prophet. He didn't say a priest. He's going to be a prophet. He's going to be a prophet like Abraham was a prophet. Like Noah was a prophet. Like Moses was a prophet. Like Joshua was a prophet. Like Deborah was a prophet. Samuel was a prophet. He's going to be in that line. He's going to be not a priest, but a prophet. Called by God for this. This is his introduction to the nations. Not just to Israel. Because what he has to do, what God's purpose for him to do, is going to expand beyond just Israel, Judea, Jerusalem. It's going to be way beyond that. His role is going to be so important and it's going to be so memorable in the lives of the Jews is that when Jesus walks onto the scene in the first century, they're whispering, I think he's Jeremiah. Jeremiah's come back. Because if you remember, there was a bit of an interchange where Jesus says, who do people say I am? Because he knows the whispers. He knows people are wondering, what's all this that's going on? And Jeremiah is not known for miracles, but he's known for mourning. see the way Jesus goes about so boldly, with so much conviction, and just going forward with these warnings to Israel, they go, it's like Jeremiah. We think he could beat Jeremiah. That's the kind of person we're dealing with Jeremiah. Now here's the thing. This is Jeremiah's perspective, and this is what we need to learn from it. When you love God more than your country. Say that with me. When you love God more than your country. When you love God more than your country, you love your country better. When you love God more than your country, you love your country better. If Jeremiah had loved his country more than God, they would have never got the warning. They would have never heard the message. They would have never known how to respond, and we'd never have look. But he loved God more than country. And it's the same for us Christians. When you love God more than your country, you love your country better. Because you want what's best for it. You're not swayed by culture and society, just going to do what's going on here and do what's going on there, even though it's completely wrong. You've got a true north on your compass. You love God. You follow God. And when you do that, you're actually loving your country better. Because that's what your country needs. It doesn't need you to just be swayed by the wind and go along with whatever. It needs you to love God more than your country. Because when you do that, you love your country better. You have higher values for your country. You have a higher set of rights to understand. That they're inalienable rights, endowed by your Creator. Not endowed by a government. Not endowed by a government. By a Creator. When you love God more than your country, you love your country better. Say that with me. When you love God more than your country, you love your country better. One more time. When you love God more than your country, you love your country better. As the music plays, that's what I want to put on your heart this morning. As we start a new series, as we walk into the 4th of July tomorrow, think about all the blessings and all the things you're thankful for. Remember, when it's for God and country, it's God first. And that's how it has to be.